welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. You are at a More Than Music workshop. I would love for you, please, to consider joining my email list. I don't swamp people with loads and loads of emails, but what I'd love to do is after our time together this evening, for me just to send you a quick email. You might want to continue some of the conversations. You might have questions. I'd love to be able to stay in touch with you. So I'm actually just putting now in the chat link that you could grab even right now as I'm speaking. It says link to join my Kiwi Aussie email list. Please click on that and take a minute or two, even as I am continuing to talk, to join my email list. Give as much or as little detail about yourself as you want, except I will of course need your email address and at least your name. And yeah, please do that so I can do that follow-up. So you've come along to a More Than Music workshop, and I'm so glad you've joined us here tonight. I think the furthest away person is in New South Wales. Anyone further away than that? Perhaps not. Looks like most of us are Kiwis, which is great. I have to, before we get into the sort of the meat of this, but I'd love to give a little bit of background to my story. Some of you might have heard a couple of these things before, but I'm going to show you some embarrassing old photographs. As you've heard, my name's Grant Norsworthy. I used to live in Melbourne, Australia. That's where I was born. But I was in a band called the Paul Coleman Trio. This is going back a while now. We formed in the late 1990s, the previous millennium. And I'm going to show you a rather embarrassing old photograph. Here it is. I'll probably be able to tell that you can see that photograph because you're laughing at me. Yep, I think a few people are. That's me on the right in that photograph. I hope you can see it. As Paul Coleman in the middle, our main songwriter, our lead singer, my mate Phil Gordian on the left, and me on the right. I may or may not be wearing eyeliner in that photograph. I don't want to confirm or deny. But we in the Paul Coleman Trio, we were all followers of Jesus, and we'd been involved in the Christian church for many years. I was raised attending Baptist church with my family in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, Australia. And we were all passionate about Jesus, and we all wanted to make music professionally. And so we formed the Paul Coleman Trio and put out 4 albums in Australia before we signed a recording contract with a label in America. And it was actually very late 2001, early 2002 when we recorded our first global release album, an album called New Map of the World, and relocated to Nashville, Tennessee in the United States. And we were making music that primarily was for people to listen to. Although our music was always, as best as we could, pointing towards the reality of God, the worth of God, how valuable God is. And we enjoyed some success with that band, but broke up in 2004. We continue to be good mates, Paul, Phil, and myself, but lives have diverged somewhat. And after that band broke up, my wife Brooke and I, we decided to stay in the United States. I wanted to be involved in music that was hopefully bringing glory to God and pointing people towards the value of God. And Nashville, Tennessee seemed to be the best place in the world to do that. So pretty soon I found myself in another band called Sonic Flood. Another embarrassing photograph. Yep, that's quite a few years ago, but that's the Sonic Flood guys. I enjoyed my 3 years playing bass guitar in that band. And I'm telling you this because I wanted to try and make a comparison. As I said, the Paul Coleman Trio, we were making music that was primarily for people to listen to, even though it was pointing towards God. In Sonic Flood, there was a change. Excuse the rabbit ear fingers, but Sonic Flood was known as being a worship band, singing worship songs to give people a worship experience. And now a higher proportion of the song lyrics were actually prayers to God. And it was much more likely that we'd present the lyrics of our songs on screens behind us or beside us. And yeah, but actually in many ways, the way we performed on stage, the way we conducted ourselves was actually very similar from the Paul Coleman Trio to Sonic Flood, even though Sonic Flood was known as being a worship band. And it sort of struck me that maybe the difference in the way we played, the way we sung, the way we performed should have been maybe a little bit more different. Now, since I finished up with Sonic Flood, which was, I want to say very early 2008, I just started heading out on my own. as a speaker and a musician. I bought a guitar. Bass was my main instrument, but I bought a guitar and a capo. I learnt those four chords and learnt that I could play almost every song that the Christian church needed me to play. And just started presenting myself as a singer and a musician, but also a teacher and a speaker. And out of that has developed More Than Music Mentor, which is what you see me doing now. morethanmusicmentor.com is a website that you can find out more about that. And the tagline is equipping for artistic excellence and authentic worship. That's what I'm passionate about. You know, I really want to use a More Than Music Mentor to help the church utilize music more effectively as an expression of authentic worship. That's the whole idea. But I think most of us here on this call are Kiwis. So to help make sense of that, I'm actually beaming to you over Zoom from Upamutiri at the top of the South Island of New Zealand, about 30 minutes from Nelson. And the reason I find myself here is because back in the day, I married a beautiful girl named Brooke. She's a Kiwi. And after about 17 years of living in America, long enough to have 3 American children of our own, we decided that we'd like to relocate back to be closer to grandparents and the I guess slower pace of life in New Zealand. And we feel like we made it out of the US just in the nick of time before a lot of trouble over there. Got here just before Christmas 2018. So it still feels fresh to me as an Australian living in New Zealand. Been here for a bit over 2.5 years now, I guess, but loving being here. And so what you see in that photograph that I hope you can see is my wife Brooke and Max, our oldest boy, 14, Marcus and Casper. So that's just trying to explain a little bit of my backstory and what brings me to be in New Zealand and speaking the way I'm going to be speaking tonight about More Than Music Mentor. But some of you might know a little bit of my work last year from Upamutiri. I managed to coordinate the effort to have New Zealand or Aotearoa join the international choir that sang this song, The Blessing, released during our second lockdown 12 months ago, August 20 of last year, actually. So give us a little wave if you've seen the Blessing Aotearoa video on YouTube or anywhere else. That looks like most of us. That's great. So a lot of my hopes and my thoughts about how we can use music as a Christian church are woven into that song video. And it's what I'm hoping to dig into a bit more deeply tonight. Oh, Susan Dobbs says, thank you. Didn't realize it was off. That's talking about the microphone. There we go. Yeah. So, yeah, time's flying, hasn't it? Like 12 months since the Blessing Aotearoa video came out, and that was during our second lockdown, and Auckland's had a few more than the rest of us, I know, but here we are again in lockdown, hopefully coming out of it soon. So let's think about this for a moment. Music, singing, songs, instruments, sound systems, projectors, screens. A lot of effort from the Christian church goes into this music stuff. And I'm going to ask us, what is the goal? What is the goal of all this effort that we put into music? Do we have a goal? And I'd like to think that most of us here, maybe all of us would very quickly be able to say, yes, we do have a goal. Our goal is the worship of God, to worship God. Maybe you could nod. I can see your faces. Is that what you? Yeah, I'd agree with that too. We have these songs, we have this singing stuff, and we have in the Christian church for a couple of thousand years because we believe this is an important way of worshiping God. But what is worship? What is worship? Well, I want to tell you a couple little anecdotes here. When I was, I think, about 19 years old, this is on the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, I'd been raised in a very conservative, quite formal Baptist church where the music was always quiet with an organ, piano, we had hymnals, and there was that wooden plaque on the back of the wall which had several numbers, which were the hymn numbers. Anyone resonating with this? Anyone old enough like me to remember this? You know, the final number, if the sermon went a bit long, someone would stand up and say, let's sing 147, but only verses 1 and 93. You know, like that was the musical world within the church that I was raised in. And then some of my younger friends and I, we started going to bigger youth events or different church services, and we heard bands like drums, bass, electric guitars, songs with grooves, songs that seemed so much more exciting to us. And I loved the old hymns. I continue to love the old hymns and that other style of music, or even the scripture and song style of music. There's, I have a wonderful, warm memory of those. But there was something about this newer music that got me really excited. And I was given a chance to bring that style of music to a once a Sunday evening event that was a youth service for my home church, bringing this more contemporary style of music. And we did our very best. Like, we were young, we were passionate, we were enthusiastic, but not terribly skilled. And we must have sounded pretty horrible going through a sound system that was designed just for the preacher's voice, not for a band like ours with drums and bass and guitars and even a brass line we had. And I remember after that service, an older lady came up to me and she said, "Grant," and as she pointed her gnarly finger towards the platform where our band had been, she said, "Grant, that was not worship." What is worship? A pastor not far from where I live here in Richmond contacted me and asked me to help a young guy. They had a 20-something-year-old guy who was leading their worship through songs on Sunday mornings. But the pastor had noticed, and he didn't know why, but the pastor had noticed that not many people were singing when this young guy led. Good voice, very talented, but not many people were joining in. And the pastor asked me to speak to the young guy and give him some suggestions. And I noticed that even though this young guy has a quite a strong high tenor voice, if he led in that high tenor voice, none of the men in the room were able to join in. It was just too high for them. And so I suggested to this young guy, "Hey, would you consider changing the keys?" And he said to me, "Grant, I can't change the keys. I'm unable to worship if I sing lower." What is worship? I got a Facebook message from a woman who attended with her teenage daughter one of my events, and she was very, very thankful. In particular, she wanted to mention that it was at my event that her daughter first worshipped. And I asked her what she meant, and what she meant was it's the first time she'd seen her daughter raise her hands. What is worship? I was having a meal with a friend in Wellington not long ago. We started talking about music in the church and the worship of God. And my friend was quite bent out of shape because he didn't like some of the songs that were being sung by his home church. And he said to me, "Grant, a lot of these songs, they are just not worship." He turns out that my friend doesn't feel like songs that refer to God in anything but the second person you, like, he doesn't feel like they're worship. He wants to be singing you God songs for it to be worship. But if it's not, they're not. What is worship? Look, it seems to me that there's a lot of confusion around this word worship. And I've found it super helpful to think of the word worship primarily as a verb, a doing word. In fact, that's how I think we find it used in the Bible. And only over the last, I don't know, 40 or 50 years has the word worship started being used in the Christian church primarily as an adjective, like worship band, worship leader, worship song, worship service, worship Spotify playlist. This is a pretty recent thing. Um, and so for us to go deeper with where we want to go tonight, I think we'd probably be helped by thinking this way, that worship primarily is a verb. And originally, actually, it's really helpful to think that this is true, that only 300 years ago, the word worship wasn't said as worship, it was said worthship. In fact, Ian was telling me just recently, this is where the word came from. It was only ever a verb. And so to worship God is to ascribe value to God, to show how valuable he is. And I would like to think that the Paul Coleman Trio were trying to show the worth of God through our songs, even though we weren't asking people to sing along with them. And Sonic Flood was trying our best to show the worth of God, but we were asking people to sing along with them. You see, music can be used in different ways to show the worth of God. And I think it's worth us keeping this in mind, that the word worship is never used as an adjective in the Bible. And it's actually never used in a way that too closely links it with music. But we do find verses like this one. It says, therefore, brothers, and it's all of us, brothers and sisters, in view of God's great mercy, offer yourselves as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, and let that be your spiritual act of worship. That's a worthwhile verse for us all to keep in mind, I think. You see, I don't want to dig too deeply into this, but I want us to agree here on this call that music in our church gatherings is an important and a valuable expression of worship. But the worship that we want to lead, this showing the worth of God that we want to lead, needs to continue after our church services are over and as the songs have faded. Every moment of every day offers us a chance to show the worth of God. Yet there is something particularly powerful, potent, and I believe important that happens when believers gather together and sing as an expression of worship. Are we on the same pace so far? Can I see a few thumbs up or nods? Okay, good. Good. I missed the feedback of being in the same room with you guys. So yeah, we all should agree that the goal of our music and our singing is the worship of God. Absolutely it is. But, and this is my opinion, IMO, in my opinion, our culture overuses and misuses the word worship to such a degree that it can hide the deeper, more important meaning of worship, at least in my opinion. And number two, music singing is an important expression of worship. It's one of the ways we show the worth of God. But I'm beginning to realize that, every moment of every day is a chance to worship God. So the way I keep my marriage vow to Brooke is a way to worship God. The way I raise my children is a way of worshiping God. Studying scripture is a great way to worship God. Caring for the poor is a great way to worship God. And singing together, music in our church gatherings is another important way to worship God. And that's been freeing for me, that sort of realization. Even the changing of the way I use the word has been very helpful to me. And so number three, music singing can be used in many different ways to worship God. The Paul Common Trio, we were trying to perform music to show the worth of God. Sonic Flood were blurring performance and congregational singing to worship God. But ultimately, it is only God who can measure the worshipfulness of worship. I think we need to agree with that, right? If worship is to show the worth of God, then he's the one that needs to measure it. And we've, unfortunately, I believe, developed for ourselves a culture where people know what we mean when we say, I didn't like worship this morning. It wasn't very good. No, the guitar was out of tune. I didn't like the song choice. It was too loud. It was too soft. It was too fast. It was too slow. Pastors on Monday morning are getting emails saying, I didn't like the worship, or complaining about something. Or maybe the opposite. Worship was fantastic. I loved it. It was great. But that assumes that we can measure what God finds worshipful. And a lot of those discussions actually, I think, are about what we really like musically, or at least our preferred use of music as a way of worshiping God. Now, I felt it important to paint all that picture so we can move more deeply into this. I'm trying to find a language, guys. Look, across our call here, I don't know whether what your flavor or style of church gathering is, what your preferred musical genre is, or, different denominations, different flavors, different theological emphases will utilize music differently from one another. And I'm trying to find a language that brings us together and helps us be unified rather than divided. That's the message of the Blessing Aotearoa video. Set aside our differences and let's just sing together God's words, and let's see what beautiful things can result. And that's my hope through More Than Music Mentor as well. So I want to show you an XYZ graph. I hope you can imagine that. I hope you can see the picture of it. You've got to imagine it kind of in 3 dimensions. And it seems to me that all the different Christian churches that at least I've experienced, and I've lived in 3 different continents and worked within church music for most of my professional life. I've been doing this in Australia, in the United States, which involved a lot of travel to other countries, different parts of the world, but also now in New Zealand. And it seemed to me that different churches and different people within the church will utilize music in slightly different ways to one another. This is what I'm trying to explain. So that red x-axis, some people, it seems to me, would see music in a church gathering primarily to remind the congregation of correct theology. They want to have these songs teach. Yes, there's still going to be more going on than that, but they do want weighty, often deep, poetic, theologically correct lyrics. And on the other end of that, we see that there are some people who would utilize music in their church gatherings, and their preference is they want to sing expecting an experience of God. All right? And I call this the sing it till you feel it people. And I'm one of them. I'm a sing it till you feel it person. But you know what? I'm also a let's sing correct theology person. And I'm hoping you're starting to resonate with this. Maybe you as an individual, maybe the church congregation that you're part of might be able to be plotted on this graph somewhere. It also seems to me that some people, and this is now the vertical y-axis, some people want to sing new songs. They really value what being up to the minute and what's creative, what's now. And they might also weave into that this idea of spontaneity being of high value. And on the other end of that, we could see that some people, individuals, but also groups of people, would like to see music as a chance to remember our wonderful history, to remind each other of our traditions, and they might value structure, liturgical expressions using music. Then it seems to me some people really see music as a very potent chance to, I guess, express their individual relationship with God, their vertical me and God relationship. Very personal songs, a lot of I in the songs. And on the other end of that spectrum, there are people who would see music as a very important way of building community and a sense of togetherness, more we songs. And unfortunately, I would never say something like this, but people on the corporate horizontal end might look at the people on the individual vertical end and say, oh, there's too many Jesus is my boyfriend songs. They just sound like romance songs. And on the other end, people are arguing about, well, you just don't get it. You just don't really have this deep. Well, can I just tell you something, guys? God is bigger than that graph. You know, God is bigger than that graph. And what I'd love to have us all be able to do is just go, all right, maybe my preferred thing is somewhere on that graph, or the church family that I'm part of is on that graph somewhere. And others are free to utilize music differently than us as an expression of worship. God's bigger than the graph. And you know what? Because of my experience, because of my travels, and because of the life I guess God's allowed me to lead, I've tasted every aspect of that graph, and I love it all. And it's not an either or, it's a both and. And, you know, there can be a fine line, I think, between having some sort of experience of God through music and wanting others to taste that also. That can be a good thing. I'd love others to know what I know. I'd love others to experience what I've experienced through music. But there's a fine line between that and somehow communicating, unless you do have my understanding, unless you do have my experience, you are somehow deficient and I'm better than you. And I would love this more respectful approach from within the Christian church. The Christian church in New Zealand, the Christian church Australia, the Christian church worldwide. Music is used differently from one another, and that's okay. Let's celebrate our diversity. Which brings us back to this question that I asked before. What is the goal? Do we have a goal? And I think we'd agree, yes, we want God to be worshipped. But I'm going to phrase that question slightly differently. Do we have an agreed, measurable goal? Because if you say our goal is the worship of God, I agree, we do want God to be worshipped, but that is not something that we humans can measure. If we make our goal, we want people to experience God in a fresh way, or experience God's presence, or even grow in their understanding of God. They are things that are much harder to measure for us. And if we are going to have a team of singers, instrumentalists, and technicians from your church be on the same page, working together for a common goal, we need to know what the goal is and we need to be able to measure it. So, my question really is, do we have an agreed measurable goal? Because if the goal cannot be understood and agreed upon by the team, nor success or failure measured, they have no goal at all. So I'm going to ramp up a little bit of cynicism here for a moment, and it's supposed to be good natured. I'm not trying to pick on anybody here, but as I travel from church to church and do my on site More Than Music workshops, what I feel like I'm almost always walking into is a group of people who don't know what the goal is, and they're all tugging in different directions. And I think the biggest breakthrough you'll be able to have with your team of singers, instrumentalists, and technicians, the way you're going to be able to move and grow together and become more effective, is to first make sure there is an agreed, measurable goal. But to be cynical here for a moment, a typical team might have a drummer on the platform. What's their goal? Well, their goal is to play drums the way they want to play. They've been told they're there to be a part of the worship team, but because that doesn't really make much sense to them, what they've arrived at is, I'm going to play drums the way I want to. You might have a singer on the platform. What's their goal? Well, they're going to try and get themselves to a transcendental state that they believe is worshipfulness. You might have someone who chose the songs on Thursday, and when they were rehearsing the songs on Thursday, they got a really deep sense of God's reality and love for them. And that person's goal is that the congregation would experience what they did when they ran those songs. An electric guitarist, his goal is to try out that pedal for his real band. You know, the sound engineer's goal is to try and mix sound that gives the congregation the best listening experience possible. The projectionist's goal, well, they're there pushing advance on the lyric slides because they didn't know how to say no. We end up with all these different people pulling in different directions. And so I'm going to try and present to us some language that I think should help us be on the same page. And I'm going to do that by talking to you about soccer. Why? Well, look, I'm not a huge football fan, as we usually call it in New Zealand, or soccer, as some of the world calls it. But I have noticed when I do get a chance to watch higher level soccer matches, there's incredible unity on display. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but like everything that the team is shooting for, like the players on the field, the coaching staff, and the crowd, they all know what the goal is. And that's why there's such unity on display to me. And these crowds, they're incredible singers. I don't know if you've noticed this, but World Cup soccer crowds sing better than just about any church congregation I've ever heard, or at least with more passion, more volume. Uh, and you could say that the goal that they are all shooting for is the World Cup or to win the championship. And I would have to agree with you, yes. But actually, all their cheering, all their singing, all their waving of banners, and all the coaching decisions from the sideline, and all the fitness work and the strategizing and everything that the team on the pitch have done is so that they can get this little ball in the back of the net better than any other team. That's the real goal, or at least that's the measurable goal. Everyone knows when that goal has been achieved and when it hasn't been achieved. And if they are better at getting the ball in the back of the net than any other team in the championship, then the World Cup will look after itself. So why would I tell you all that? Well, it seems to me that we do have an agreed goal that God would be worshipped. But I think that worship of God that we humans really can't measure needs to be like the World Cup. And so my question is, what observable outcome can we agree to strive for? Or what is our ball in the back of the net goal? And if we can have an agreed measurable goal, a ball in the back of the net goal that the drummer can agree to, the sound engineer can agree to, the pastor can agree to, the congregation agree to, everyone who's involved, if we all know what the ball in the back of the net goal is, then we will do so much better. So much less confusion, so much less tugging in different directions. And I'm going to suggest, and this is the best ball in the back of the net goal I have found, is that we should be getting the congregation to sing. Sing prayers to God, sing praises of God, sing our best understandings of truth about God, and sing them together, sing them well. And I'm going to just tell you a little story. This is about a workshop I did not so long ago in near Wellington, where I was asked to prepare a team on a Thursday night to lead the congregation to worship God through these songs on Sunday morning. It's quite a small room, would have fit maybe 150 people. And there was a massive drum kit on the stage with a glass shield around it, fully mic'd up. And I was speaking to the team right before the rehearsal on Thursday, and I established this, that our ball in the back of the net goal was going to be to get the congregation singing. And I asked, could everyone be on the same page? That's how I was going to musically direct the band. We were all going to be in this together. And everyone bought into that. As soon as we started rehearsing our first song on Thursday night, I realized that there was going to be something that needed to change from the drumming. The guy that got up there was an outstandingly, like really good rock drummer. And his name's Dan, and he was playing really, really well, but it was extremely loud and extremely busy. We were playing the song 10,000 Reasons, Bless the Lord. I don't know if you know that one. And I stopped the band halfway through the song, and I said to Dan, hey, Dan, your drumming's really amazing. Like, you're serious about drumming, aren't you? And he said, yes, I am. And I said, are you in another band or something as well as this one? He goes, yeah, I've got an original band and we're called, can't remember what the name of the band was. And I said, well, and what's that band like? He said, well, we're kind of like Foo Fighters, which is, alternative hard rock. And I could tell immediately that that was the right sort of drumming style for that band. And I was able to say to Dan, I said, wow, that drumming that I'm hearing from you tonight, I could imagine that fitting really well with your Foo Fighters band. But Dan, do you remember before the rehearsal we talked about what our ball in the back of the net goal was going to be, that we were going to get the congregation singing? He said, yes. I said, great. Well, I've got to tell you, that Foo Fighters sort of drumming is going to make it much harder for us to achieve our agreed goal, our measurable goal. There are so many drum fills, and the cymbals and the snare are so loud, even from behind the drum shield, that your sound is invading the sonic space of the human voice. People will not be able to sing against your sound. And he listens to me. And I said, can I ask you to do something really, really different to what you might want to do? But I'm going to ask you to absorb this small musical sadness so that we can achieve our agreed goal. And I asked him to get out some very soft-tipped mallets and just, bless the Lord, oh my soul, really gently, just keeping us in time. And even when we got later in the song, it was still very gentle drum beat, hardly any drum fills. And because I'd said to him, a lot of your drum fills are really exciting, but they're cutting across the melody of the song and the rhythm of the melody. That's another thing that's making it tougher to sing. He went with it. He made the change. The singers in my band on the Thursday night just about jumping out of their skin saying, this song now is so much easier to sing. The sound engineer is just about to kiss Dan the drummer. He says, for the first time I can mix in this room. This is incredible. And we're all able to turn to Dan and say, Dan, thank you so much. This is going to require you to not play the way you really want to play. It's going to require you to not play in the way that brings you personal joy as a drummer. But we're hoping you can absorb that sadness so that you can, with us, taste the higher joy of helping our congregation connect with God by singing these songs. So he stuck with it for the rest of the rehearsal. He stuck with it for Sunday morning, and I hope he stuck with it since then. But I'm trying to paint you a picture that would say, if we don't have an agreed measurable goal, we can't have those sort of discussions. But with a goal, we can and we must, and it's going to help us. So our agreed measurable goal for me is to get us singing. Can you imagine if I'd said to Dan, I don't think that drumming is worshipful? Well, that'd be the end of the conversation, right? Then it's just butting heads about who thinks certain sounds and certain music is more or less worshipful. No point. We need to be talking about agreed, measurable, musical, technical goals. And some of you might be really struggling with this idea of our goal being to get people singing. It might feel like some sort of demotion or undervaluing. No, it's not. I agree that ultimately we want way more than people just singing songs. We are not just leading karaoke, or we're not just some sort of cover band. There is something way beyond. But I would suggest that no matter where you want to go on this ladder, having your congregation singing these songs together is a great first step. In your context with your people, there might be other observable things. You might want to see people raising their hands. You might want to have people come away with an experience that goes beyond just singing. And I'm not here uh, to say anything necessarily for or against all that. I'm a huge fan of all that, but I know that some people seem not to be wired that way. And I believe we need to be a more unified church in this regard. But I believe no matter where you want to go higher up on that ladder, having your group of people singing together, singing great songs that are actually prayers to God, praises of God, and declarations of truth about God is the perfect first step, the first rung on the ladder, no matter where you want to go to from then. Now, I've got to confess to you, we had a few technical issues right before we started this presentation. So some of my slides, the fonts got changed last minute. I thought I was going to present them from this device. Instead, it's being this device. So some of the text on my screen, on the screen that I'm going to show you, is not going to look proper. It's not going to look great, sorry. But let me explain to you. So I've got a photograph here. And this is a photograph of a big event that's known as being a worship event. And there's a big congregation there, but there's lights and there's even a mist in the air. I can imagine the sound in that room is pretty massive. The word that comes to mind for me is concert, but that is a concert that I believe is intended to be worshipful to God, to scoop those people up and realize that God is actually worthy of their praise. And I'm not critical of that utilization of music as an expression of worship. But now I'm going to show you another photograph, and that's another place where music is being used, a campfire. And as I say, please forgive some of the messing up in my slides as we go. But it seems to me that in our church gatherings on a Sunday morning, and this is where I want you to start thinking about your context. Think about your room, the architecture of it. Think about the congregation that comes into your services on a Sunday. Maybe not right now during lockdown, but hopefully when we're outside of that. Is it more like a concert or more like a campfire sing-along? And I think each of us need to be deciding for ourselves, well, how far can we lean in either direction? This should be freeing for you. Should we be trying to put on a high production concert expression of worship? Or should we be having more like a congregational campfire sing-along as an expression of worship? And I would like to think that for most of us in New Zealand, not all of us, but for most of us, I think we should be leaning way more towards campfire. And we can see what we see on YouTube from Hillsong or Phil Wickham or from Maverick or from Elevation or from Bethel. And we can see that and be inspired, but realize that is in their context. We might even look at what Big Life Church are doing or the big Arise Church down the road or whatever and think, we don't need to copy them. They are doing what they do in their context. And I really think that we don't need to copy them. We need to work out, all right, what's our context? Does it need to be more campfire or more concert? And I'd ask you to ask yourself some pretty hard-hitting questions. These are not supposed to be cynical questions, but these are the sort of questions I think each of us need to ask ourselves before we decide where the needle falls between concert and campfire. You need to ask yourself things like this. Is your congregation naturally and rapturously passionate to worship God through songs? Because it seems to me that some people are and some people are not. And all of us are somewhere in between. And I wish more of us were passionate. I wish more of us were naturally, rapturously passionate. But that's not always the case. And we can't make people jump there this Sunday. We've got to meet people where they're at and gradually encourage them to be more passionate. But where are they now? Answer that question for yourself. What about this one? Is your congregation led by a celebrity vocalist? Yes or no? How much of a celebrity? Because I tell you what, I mean, I've been to events with, I mean, I think Phil Wickham is an incredible singer, a great artist, and I've been in the congregation when he has led the worship of God through songs. And he's intentionally blurring the lines between concert performance and sing along. I'm not able to sing with him. His singing is way too high for me, but I don't want him to sing it in my key. I think there's something beautiful and powerful about the sound of Phil Wickham's voice in his key, uh, and the sound being mixed more like a concert, and the lighting being more like a concert. I think I can still have the worth of God presented to me when I'm listening to a concert. But that's not most of us, right? We don't have a celebrity vocalist. So in our setting, what should it be more like? Another question. Is your congregation, sorry, I messed up my questions, did I? Oh, yeah. Do you consider your congregation to be very large? Is the second one. Sorry about that. Yeah. I'm not going to define for you what large is. Is your congregation led by a celebrity vocalist? I spoke about that. Number four is during the week, does the congregation listen to and enjoy the original artist versions of the songs they are asked to sing on Sunday? Some people listen to Rima. Some people listen to, you know, this music and they just love it. And they're easier to lean towards concert for those types of people. Um, but not many of our people in our church congregations are really fans of this music. And it's probably, I like to think this, a huge fan of Bon Jovi will sing Living on a Prayer even after the key change because they're huge fans of Bon Jovi and they just love this sort of music. They don't need much encouragement, but that's not most of our church congregation members. So we need to keep that in mind. And I also got a fifth question, the last one. Is there a high level of production for your services? Is the line between congregational singing and concert performance intentionally blurred? I sat down with the wonderful people at Life Church, who I'm so pleased to have sent some vocal participation for the Blessing Aotearoa. And I got a chance to chat with them about this very question. And they said, yeah, we actually lean pretty hard towards concert in our main room on a Sunday morning and for our stream services. We're trying to show the worth of God, and having the congregation actually singing every word is not as big a priority to us. And I celebrate their choice about that. I celebrate their intentionality. But we need to have more clarity, and I think more intentionally choose campfire above concert in most of our situations. And maybe that's not yours, but maybe it is. But I just know that I will be talking to you about, and I talk to any team, coaching any team, about substance over style, uh, like being real. I think our congregations resonate most when we are just saying, look, this is who we are. We're doing our best, and we want you to join a band with us, join the choir with us, and recognize that this music thing we're doing on a Sunday morning, God is the audience, not the congregation. We are all scooped up together, and we're all trying to recognize that God is the object of our praise, the object of our song. And I believe that playing with your weaknesses and doing what you can with what you've got is way better than pretending you're something that you're not. Trying very hard to be Hillsong, trying very hard to be Life Church, trying very hard to be Phil Wickham. No, let's be who we are. Substance over style and authenticity over perfection. Now, a quick little statement here. Look, this is not to be critical of anyone who uses backing tracks. The Paul Coleman Trio used some backing tracks sometimes, mainly because we were stacked against other bands that were using backing tracks. And if you don't know what we're talking about here, this is actually having extra sound generated that actually isn't being played or sung by us on the platform, but extra sounds that are being added to our sound to make us sound bigger, fuller. Sonic Flood used a lot of backing tracks. But I see even small churches, the churches of 100, 200 people in the congregation, starting to use backing tracks. And I think the pressure is to try and sound as good as the original artist. My advice would be don't do that. I think your congregation will engage better if you are just more like a campfire rather than trying to be a concert. Hey, hopefully that's not a contentious issue. Ian, I'm hoping you're reading some of these chat questions. I'm seeing quite a few comments and questions. Even feel free to throw those in there, and we'll come back to them at the end. But just know that this is kind of my emphasis, my bent. You know, we've got to think about it this way: guidance or performance. And for me, I'm a huge fan of performing in a way that brings glory to God. And I believe that some of the coaching that I provide can help with that if that is the decision. But I would like to think that for most of us, and our regular week in, week out, Sunday morning in the trenches, how do we use music in our church services? We should be leaning way more towards guidance. And a massive problem I see, guys, is teams on a platform in front of their congregations sending mixed messages saying, we want you to sing with us, but actually we don't. Sing with us, but don't. What's an example of that? We might start playing the intro to a song. We might put the words to verse 1 on the screens, ask everyone to stand, let's sing together, and then the key is inappropriate for the congregation. Then the person who's leading the singing embellishes the melody and adds some vocal augmentation. There are three other singers who are waiting for the chorus when they can add their harmony. We're sending mixed messages. Is it a performance, or are we supposed to be singing? A lot of people on the platform seem to be confused about that. A lot of congregations are confused about that. Now, I'm a huge fan of both, and I think both have a place, even in a church gathering. Let me tell you another little quick story. The photograph that you might be able to see there, I hope you can, is of Brittany Batson. She's an incredible singer in Nashville, Tennessee. And on quite a few occasions, I got to have Brittany in a band that I formed. I was sometimes asked to form a band to lead the worship of God through songs at different events. And so Brittany was one of the women I'd asked to be in the band with me. Now, we were a couple of years ago in Nashville, Tennessee, asked to lead the worship of God through songs for a group of about 500 independent artists from all around, not just America, but other places in the world. And so they were really a mixed bunch, but they loved music. And we were actually going to sing Amazing Grace, the old hymn. And it occurred to me, an idea occurred to me, because Brittany is an incredible singer. And I said to the congregation, I said, hey, we're going to sing Amazing Grace. I invite you to sing, but let's not sing verse 1. Brittany, would you sing verse 1 for us? Brittany, sing it the way you want to sing it. Show us what you got, sister. Sing it. And therefore, I thought, I'm going to send a very clear signal. People, don't sing verse 1. Brittany sang verse 1, Amazing Grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And she carved it up, and the room was held in raptures. And then I invited the congregation to sing verse 2. And Brittany knows when we are leading a congregation to sing, she sings it straight. She sings it simple. She's an octave above my melody, and we sing melody together, just showing the people how to sing it. And I believe that that group of 500 indie artists sang verse 2 of Amazing Grace way better than they would have sung if we'd sung verse 1 and verse 2 together. So I believe that performing can be used as a wonderful way, not only of showing the word of God, but also to invite our congregations to sing. The problem often I see is mixed messages. Make sure you know what you're doing and be very intentional about that. So most of my coaching through More Than Music Mentor is to emphasize the guidance rather than the performance. Intentionality is an important word here. What do we mean by intentionality? The fact of being deliberate or purposeful. And I'm going to ask you to be more deliberate and more purposeful about whether you're inviting your congregation to sing or whether you are wanting them to listen to you sing. Both can be worshipful. But I would suggest that on Sunday morning, it should be more the first, intentionally, deliberately, purposefully inviting your congregation to sing, guiding the congregation to find their voice, inviting the congregation to sing with us rather than listen to us perform for them. And what are we asking them to sing? Well, not just any old song. We're asking them to sing prayers to God, praises of God, and declarations of God's truth. So this is the what I think our goal should be, our ball in the back of the net goal. There's something beautiful and powerful that happens when a group of people, group of believers, followers of Jesus, come together, gather in one room, and sing together, one voice, one lyric, singing together. That's what I call the higher joy. And why is the singing together so important? Well, I want to introduce quickly this idea of what and how versus why. I get contacted by people, or sometimes I show up to do a workshop and people want me to try and solve what and how questions. What songs should we be singing? What key should they be in? How should we sing them? How loud should it be? All these sort of questions. And I don't want to get into any of the what and how questions until we have first agreement on what the ball in the back of the net goal is and reminders of why it's important to achieve that ball in the back of the net goal. Why is it important that we sing? Well, I've come up with my top 10 reasons of why we sing. I'm worried that my fonts are all going to overlap here a bit, but we'll get through it, I'm sure. This is my personal list. It may not be exhaustive, it may not be complete, but I have found that for me, as a person who feels that it's important for the church to sing as an expression of worship, it's good for me to remind myself of the good reasons why. Because I tell you, there's some reasons that are sometimes bounced around that aren't good reasons. Like, why do we have music and singing in a church gathering? So that people know to come in from the lobby, from the foyer, so that people know to come in from the car park, so they know the service has started, so that the preacher gets to preach to a more full room, to give our singers and instrumentalists just something to do, just to get them involved in some sort of service opportunity. There are many reasons why they get thrown around that I don't think they're not in my top 10 anyway. Let's remind ourselves of the big important reasons why. You might want to steal from my list, you might want to write your own, but I think you and your team should know these big reasons why it's important that our church congregation sings together. And for me, number 10 is tradition. For 2,000 years, followers of Jesus have gathered and sung songs together. We today in 2021 have an opportunity to continue this beautiful history. We don't have to replace it. We don't have to reinvent it, but we do have a responsibility to grow it and to build upon it. So tradition is important to me, but I have put it number 10 intentionally. It's not the most important reason to me. And I am concerned that there are people in our congregations who believe that the main reason why we have music in a church gathering is so that they hear the songs they want to hear, so that they get to have reminders of their tradition. And I'd love to think that those people perhaps should be challenged on that thinking. If number 10, tradition, is their number one reason, we can't be thinking we have this music because we always have. There's got to be better reasons than that. My number 9 I've written down as creativity, art, theme. What I mean by that is, it seems to me that, I love music, and I wouldn't mind betting that everyone in this Zoom call loves music. Music resonates with me deeply. And the lyrics that accompany this music are important to me as well. And while you can write a song and sing a song about being angry or romantic love or wanting to dance all night, I can't think of a better thing to be creative about, a better theme, a better thing to make art about than this, that there is a God who loves us and that Jesus, God incarnate, came to earth, died for us and rose from the dead. Hallelujah. What could be better than that to be creative about and to write music about and sing together about? I can't think of it if there is one. Number 8 on my list is modeling church. It seems to me that if you have a group of people on the platform playing instruments with microphones, people behind mixing consoles, behind computers, projecting lyrics, there's an opportunity to have a group of people who are prepared to play a small role in something way bigger than themselves. And I think this is what the church is supposed to be about. We have a small role to play. We are part of something that's way bigger than ourselves. I think there's an invisible flow of beautiful creativity that can happen between a group of people, singers, instrumentalists, and technicians, who serve their congregation's voice is more important than the voice of the people with microphones. The congregation's voice is more important than the drumming or the playing or the personal objectives for a mix. I'm seeing some people saying they've got to go, and I totally get that. We're 8:30. We'll be going probably until about 9. But if you need to split, Jenny, that is, I think, you split. That's fine. Um, so modeling church is my number 8. Number 7, preparing hearts and minds. Now, typically in a church service, we would have some songs that go ahead of other things, like maybe a Bible reading, the sermon, might be communion. I think there's something that happens through this music that can soften people towards what's going to happen next. But my number 6 is uh, I'm trying to express this thought that there is something that happens through the music. Like music, yes, can prepare people for what comes next, but there's something that can happen that I believe is important, a taste of heaven even, that can happen through the songs themselves. I don't know what it's like for you, but this seems to most often happen for me when I'm in a congregation surrounded by a lot of people singing. It happens less so when I'm feeling like I'm the only person singing. Or if I'm feeling like maybe I better not sing because I don't want to be a soloist because no one around me is singing. But when I'm in that group of people who are lifting our voices, God can often choose that moment to touch me deeply, to do something in my heart. I can't explain it. It's beyond the five senses. It's beyond our three dimensions. And it's almost like God takes that opportunity to put a healing oil on the rusty hinges of the gates of my heart. And those gates swing a little wider. And a little bit more of who God is, His grace, His mercy, His love flows into me. And that can be healing. It can be transformative. And that's what I want for congregations. And you know, on a Wednesday, after our Sunday service, when something very difficult happens in life, a person might have forgotten the Bible reading, might have forgotten the sermon, but they're much more likely to remember that chorus that we sang together. And in that moment, there can be that touch of God that we all need. So there's something that happens through the music. Don't undervalue it. Now, I think this is an important thing for all of our teams to be reminded of. You're not just up there playing bass so you get to play bass because because we always do. No, there's something way more important, something bigger happening here. And that church congregation that sings together, this is getting very confusing with my text. I'm so sorry. Preparing hearts and minds. Music goes by no fun. Yeah, from information to intimacy. You know, this information that there is a God who loves us, who died for us and rose from the dead, is pretty difficult information. And we can know it in our heads, but not really have it seep into our hearts. And I think music has a particular potential for allowing that information about God to be changed into intimacy with God. It certainly has been the case for me. I think it is for many people. And, you know, we want that to happen more, that transformation. Music can do that. Horizontal connection is my number 4. In a group of people who sing together, agree with each other, they are more likely to get along with each other, and there's a wonderful community building aspect to this singing together. This is another important reason why we would sing in our church services. And I would also add to that, though, there is vertical connection. There's something that can happen between us and God as individuals and as a community that's important, and it seems to me is much more likely as we have music and singing together. Now, I'm going to do something a little bit cheeky and have number 2 blank for a moment, because I wouldn't mind. I'm going to ask you what you think number 2 might be, and maybe even put it in the chat here. But my number 1 is because God is God and just deserves to be praised. If I'm going to allow music to come out of me, it ought to be directed towards Him as a measure of my gratitude towards what God has done for us. But just here in the chat, for those of us who are here, anyone want to guess what number 2 might be? Just looking through the list there, like number 10's tradition, being creative towards God sounds good. We want a chance to have our team model church. We believe that preparing hearts and minds happens through our music. Someone's written here because of who we are in Christ. I think that's actually woven into other elements of this, Cheryl, but thanks for your comment. Because he commanded to sing in the scriptures. Jackie, where's Jackie? Jackie. That to me nails it because the Bible tells us to do this. The Bible, it's biblical. Irene said it as well. Uh, yeah. And to summarize that, we are after this vertical and horizontal connection. Yes, but let's remember that the Bible tells us very clearly to sing together. A lot of the Psalms are song lyrics. A lot of other passages in the Bible have this idea of people coming together, and because God loves us, because of his gifts to us, because of his grace, because of his mercy, we find ourselves bursting into song to respond. Singing is a whole body experience. It involves the whole of us. I love that, Rachel. But check out this Bible passage. It says, this is Colossians 3:16 says, let the message of Christ dwell among you richly as you teach and admonish one another with all wisdom through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, singing to God with gratitude in your hearts. Hey, a couple of things I want to notice about that verse. It doesn't mention worship. Not many of the Bible verses that we find that talk about singing and music and musical instruments talk about worship. Um, we do find the word worship used in many other places, which is important for us to be aware of. But I wanted to highlight this, that in Colossians 3:16, there is both the vertical and the horizontal. Look at that. At the end of the second line, I've highlighted the words one another. So there is this horizontal component to this singing. And also I've highlighted near the end of the second to last line, to God. That's the vertical. I've heard some people say, no, no, what I'm supposed to be doing up here on the platform with my microphone is purely vertical. It's just me and God, just me and God. And hopefully other people follow, but that's up to them. And I wanted to challenge that way of thinking. But I would also challenge all I'm supposed to do is get people singing. I've just got to it's only horizontal. It's both. What about Ephesians 5:19? It says a similar thing. Speak to one another. I'm going to highlight it. There it is. There's the vertical. Speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and song from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your hearts to the Lord. Two really great verses for us to know. Why don't we have those verses as memory verses for our singers, instrumentalists, and technicians, reminding ourselves of the big reasons why it's important that we play and sing and engineer, mix and tech in a way that has us all reminded the big reasons why. And now, Ian Buckley, I better listen to him. He says, Jesus said, God is spirit, and they who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's right. John chapter 4, verse 24. And I believe what Jesus is talking about there is way beyond our music. Way beyond our music. I think our music, our singing together is a thread of this fabric of worshiping in spirit and in truth, worshiping as a living sacrifice. So, hey, I love this quote. As we draw to a close here, before we have some Q&A time that I'd love you to hang around for. And I'm hoping, Ian, if there have been any questions showing up in this chat, I hope we can go back. And if anyone's got some others, they can be adding them now. But I love this quote. Music speaks what cannot be expressed, soothes the mind and gives it rest, heals the heart and makes it whole. And my font ran out, but the last line is flows from heaven to the soul. Music speaks what cannot be expressed, soothes the mind and gives it rest, heals the heart and makes it whole, flows from heaven to the soul. Hey, if you haven't done it already, I would love you to join up to my email list. I'll send you a welcome email probably tomorrow when I get around to sorting that out. And if you don't want to be on my email list, you can just unsubscribe after that. There'll be a link on there where you can do it. But I hope we can stay in touch because I don't want tonight just to be some sort of single bombing raid thing. I'd like to start developing a relationship with people who, like you, who are passionate about music as an expression of worship. I wouldn't mind betting that all of you, most of you, are somehow involved in the Christian church and trying to help us with this musical expression of worship. So yeah, let's continue the conversation. You might have questions or comments to make. There's that link again in the chat. Now, I would like to move to Q&A, but just know that all of what I've spoken about here is part of the More Than Music Mentor curriculum. But this has been what I consider core content that should be relevant, I believe is relevant, no matter what your style, flavor, emphasis, no matter where you are on that XYZ graph I showed at the start. I'd like to think this could be helpful and relevant to you. But I do have a lot of other much more musical, technical, practical teaching. I've got my AV Pro helper, Mark Patterson, here on the line too. I've actually got slides I could show about what it means to practice a song, what a sound check is, how to choose an appropriate key so that your congregation is more likely to sing it. I'm itching to jump into the what and the how with you guys. We don't have time for much of that tonight, but I think we've got to let the what and the how flow out of the why. And that's why I've spent our session tonight talking about this ball in the back of the net goal, getting our congregation singing, choosing between, in your context, whether we lean towards concert or campfire, and then reminding us of the big reasons why we would think it's important that our church congregations sing together.